Good afternoon. Welcome to the Road to Publishing panel. I'm Rachel Hannell, and I'll be moderating this panel today. And as you can see, we have 5 guests with us. And so I'll briefly introduce each guest, and then we'll just get right into the nitty-gritty of writing and publishing and how an author actually goes from writing, either on a piece of paper or on a typewriter or on a computer, to actually having a book in their hands to sell to readers like you. So first off, we have T. Aaron Sisko. He is a contemporary Afrofuturism author, television producer, and contributing writer for TwinCitiesGeek.com. The last few years have seen the release of Teleportality, Dragon Variation, The Preternaturalists, Shadow of the Valley, and the pulp serial Big Ass Aliens. Great title. Phyllis Cole Dye began pecking away on an old manual typewriter in childhood and never stopped. She has authored or edited 10 books in multiple genres. Her latest book is For the Sake of One We Are Love and Are Losing, a meditative poem and journal. Other recent titles include Beneath the Same Stars, a novel of the 1862 U.S. Dakota War, and Poetry of Presence, an anthology of mindfulness poems with Ruby Wilson. Chris Dornberry is the award-winning author of the mystery suspense thrillers Straight River and Castle Danger. The stories feature Matt Lanier, a farm kid turned professional musician whose world is turned upside down by a conspiracy of powerful, ambitious, violent men. Dale Swanson's books include the novels The 39th Man, Tears of Sorrow, and the memoir Simpler Times. Swanson regularly speaks at schools, history centers, senior centers, clubs, and many other organizations. And Jonathan W. Sweet is an award-winning journalist, the author of 6 books, the ghostwriter of a few more, and has contributed to or edited more than 25 anthologies and collections. In 2019, he founded Brick Pickle Pulp, which publishes books in the classic pulp style. He is also the host of the weekly Pulp Nostalgia audiocast, and in 2020 was named to the Who's Who in New Pulp. So welcome to the 5 of you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And we really will start by hearing each one of you. I'm very interested in your writing journey, where that started, and at what point you decided, I would really like to publish my writing. I would really like to have books. And in what form that took, like how you actually got books published. As people know, there's a lot of different paths to publication. And so I'm just really curious from each of you what your path looked like. So why don't we start with T. Aaron. Can you tell us more about your writing life, your writing history, and how your books came to be?
Absolutely. I took kind of the scenic route, at least I like to describe it that way, in that, so I was working as a local news producer, but was always a fan of genre fiction, particularly like science fiction, a big Star Trek fan, if my background didn't give that away. And I had ideas for one character in particular, Billy, who ended up being the lead protagonist of what became my first novel, Teleportality. And I erroneously believed that since I already worked in broadcasting, well, this is also an entertainment medium. It'll be an easy transition. Boy, I was way off the mark on that. So I just had an idea. I kind of wrote, in essence, a spec script, not even like a manuscript or even preview pages. And I was taking it to like other producers and people in broadcasting, and they were like, "Oh, this is interesting, but this is not what we do. Are you trying to make a pilot or a show or a series or something along those lines?" I was like, "No, I think this could work as a show, but it would be cooler if it was like a novel or something of that nature." And that didn't really work out. So eventually I realized I should probably write more than 3 pages, just kind of doing an overview, and sat down, kind of banged out a manuscript, and then kind of learned the hard way that it's not like television where you can submit like a demo reel to various networks and then get an interview and they say, "All right, now you're working in the business." So I then learned about query letters and how to approach publishers and agents and all those other things. And none of that really worked out. I have an inbox full of very polite and some not so polite rejection letters. And so I went kind of the DIY route, or indie authoring. I don't know what the new term is. They keep changing so often. and put it out there, got a positive response, and was just sort of hooked because it's so much easier to get the idea from up here to the page, as opposed to if you have an idea for a show or something, or even with my nonfiction work, writing as a television reviewer for Twin Cities Geek, I just go to my editor, I say, hey, I want to review this show, or this is going on, I think this would be an interesting subject. They say yay or nay, and then within days or weeks, it's published and available to the public. Whereas with novels and novellas and short stories, it was kind of freeing in a way, because there were less boundaries, but also that made it much more horrifying, because at least with nonfiction, my editor would say, oh, here's a typo, or here's this. And the editors that I've worked with, they're very nice. But a lot of them just do that structural. They don't tell me whether or not, is this a good story? Is this working? Does this plot point make sense? Are you kind of being overly verbose, like I'm doing in this Zoom call? So there was that sort of kind of long way around, and I like to think that after all these years I've gotten the hang of it, but no, kind of pleasantly to my surprise, again, pleasant surprise. I'm still learning every day. Yeah, that's kind of my very long, convoluted journey.
Yeah, no, thank you. And that's something that we all can talk about, after we're all done, but you brought up a good point about the inbox full of rejections. I think that we've all been there. And I think that that's, as writers, that's something that we just really have to learn how to deal with, and not let that get us down, and still, find a way to get our writing out there. So I'm glad that you brought up that point. Phyllis, how about you?
Well, another scenic route, I guess, to use Thierry's term. I'm a hybrid author, so it depends on the project that I have as to which direction that I want to go. But as I get older, I'm more impatient or more excited to get my work out there in a faster way, I guess. I started writing liturgical materials when I was in seminary. I had a co-author who was often published before. And so I really cut my teeth on the discipline of writing then, but that also kind of pigeonholed me. I mean, those books are still selling, and that was 40 years ago, 30 years ago, something like that. And that's far from what I write these days, but those were for a big publishing house. And my experience early on was that big publishers will market your stuff for you. So I thought, that's the way to go, that is no longer the case. And so at least for the kind of things that I write, I'm figuring out that there's less chance of being disappointed by what an author will or won't do for you if you just take control of the project yourself. And in most cases nowadays, that's what I choose to do. I have established 2 imprints, one for fiction and one for nonfiction and poetry, and I publish under those imprints, although I still dabble in traditional publishing now and then.
Thank you. And that's a good point about the big publishers and the marketing. You're absolutely right. There's just less and less money, right, for big publishers to throw behind their authors. And I think what we're seeing is that marketing going to a very few, very, very big authors. So unless you have that, the odds are, really not in our favor that we're going to be kind of that breakout author that publisher is going to say, yeah, I'm going to throw all of our marketing money behind you. So even if you do get into a big publishing house and they say, yeah, we want to publish you, like you said, Phyllis, a lot of times that work is still all on you, or a big part on you to go out there and market your own stuff anyway. So
still making a small slice of the pie, and I'm not in this to become a millionaire, but I would like to break even and be able to put a little money into my son's college account,
Yep, exactly. Money's always good. Yeah, you don't want to lose money. Chris, what about you?
Tieran's comment about the scenic route is pretty good. Mine didn't start till about 2008, and I figure I'm on my what they call classic 7th career. Everybody's got 7 different careers during their lifespan. And before this, I was a pretty active stock trader. And when the financial crisis hit in 2007, 2008, I once again realized that the game is more and more rigged. And I said, I got to get out of here and find something else to do with my time. I like to do jobs that are mentally stimulating, which is what I liked about trading. And I was also a musician and a teacher. So I thought, what can I do that's mentally stimulating? And for some reason, I still don't know exactly when I decided, gee, maybe I could write. But I started writing in 2008, which is right about the time that ebooks became popular, online communications, e-publishing, self-publishing was just beginning to be more than a vanity press. But I thought, well, I'm still the traditional guy. I got my 75 rejections, and half of them were on paper. And then, later on, I started getting the email rejections. So I just started writing short stories, entering contests, got into, I'm an active wilderness canoer, and I thought there's a canoe journal called Boundary Waters Journal, which publishes long form articles about people's trips in the wilderness. I submitted one of those, and lo and behold, the editor said, well, I'll pay you $350 for this. And I figured, gee, if somebody's willing to pay me money for something I wrote, maybe I could write a novel. And I'd been working on a novel, so I shopped it around and did all that. And it was horrible, of course, because it was my first one. But then you learn and you go to writing conferences and you study, you do a do-it-yourself thing, because I'm a cheapskate. You do the do-it-yourself learning and learn all about the marketing and the promotion and the craft of writing. And then you, about that time, about 2014, 2015, self-publishing or indie publishing became more and more acceptable. And I decided, being of a person of a certain age, I don't necessarily have enough time to wait around for the magic agent to find me and discover my book. Plus, I also wanted to help my cause, Big Brothers Big Sisters. So I thought, well, better to publish now by myself and struggle with sales rather than wait for 5-10 years to get a publisher and make any money on the book. So I totally went to the self-publishing route, and it's been hard and everything, but I'm pleased that it's going okay. And like Phyllis said, one day I hope to break even, but you never know. I'm not in this for the money.
Right. We write because we have something to say. Yeah. Right. And if somebody said, oh, I'm going to write because I want to make money on it, that's for sure the recipe for disaster right from the beginning. Yeah. Yep. Dale, how about you and your books?
Well, I got started in writing when I was pretty young, but what really got me pumped up and got me going was when my father died. My mother was still around, and I think I had the very best childhood possible. And every day would find me in the woods playing or in the lake swimming. I was raised on an island, actually it was Island Park out by Mound on Lake Minnetonka. Didn't have a lot of money, so it's not a Minnetonka story. But anyway, I started writing things for myself, and I would just write them when something interesting came up, and I'd file it away. And when my mother started to get up in years, I started dragging some of these things out. They were remembrances that I had of my childhood and how my parents had affected my growth and the place we lived and everything. And that got me going. She just loved to hear those things. So, and I just had them filed away. Well, when my mother died, I decided that I was going to try to build a book out of these things. And so I started doing that. And then I went to a class reunion from my graduating high school class. And at that reunion, I learned, I think Phyllis will be able to react to this, I learned about the hangings that occurred in Mankato. And I must have been asleep during those classes, because I don't remember hearing a thing about it. So I started to research, and I was going to do, my intent, I had begun to write just a novel, just a fictional novel. But after I started looking into that, I found out some things. I read the autobiography of Lawrence Tolliver. Now, Lawrence Tolliver was the first Indian agent out here. At the time, it was known as Northwest Territory. And Lawrence Tolliver wrote his autobiography. He was here at the beginning. He was here during the period when Minnesota became a state, and then he went back to Washington. But when I read that, I realized I have to write this factually. So what I did on my first book was weave my fictional character through the tapestry that occurred in the historical records. And it came out pretty good. It was published by the way, I must have sent out 60 or 70 letters that I got rejections on. And I finally found an editor that didn't want me to pay to the moon to get things edited, but she was very good. And she edited it after she got her edit done, and I sent it to one press, and they said, yeah, we want it. And so that's what started my writing. And after that first one, it's fine. I've got 4 more books, so I've written 5 books. By the way, this one was not listed in your intro, but I've gotten enough money to keep redoing books and do this, do the other thing, and put a little bit of money. Not, of course, it doesn't stay in the bank because you have to invest in your next book. Mm-hmm. So I think everyone that's on this panel can relate to that.
Yeah, it's almost like a little nonprofit venture, right? When we're trying to do our writing, like anything we were to make, it just has to go right back into the writing process, yep. Into the publishing process. And Jonathan, what about your journey?
Sure. A lot of similarities, I think, to some of the other folks on the panel. But, you know, I've been went to school for journalism. I've been a journalist for more than 20 years. Started a newspaper, magazines. Always had an interest in writing books. Really got to the point where for me, writing all day as a job left me almost too tired to think about writing more. And about 5 years ago, changed my job, and my responsibilities changed, became kind of less writing focused, and that kind of, I think, freed me to then do that writing in book form that I didn't feel like, all right, I've written all day, I'm going to come home and write some more, and my mind wasn't in the right place. But for me, again, as a journalist, I've written nonfiction and fiction, but the nonfiction comes much more easily to me. I enjoy writing the fiction, but it's more of a longer process for me. The nonfiction comes a lot easier to me. But really, I've worked with some small publishers in the pulp field, but most of my stuff is self-published, like a lot of people. And for a lot of the same reasons other people in the panel were saying, the ability to get it out there quickly. I love the fact that I can finish a book, get it edited, work with the designer, and boom, it's out, versus waiting months or a year or whatever, because you're waiting for, yeah, we got 20 books ahead of you and we're still waiting on the cover here, so it's going to take a while. Whereas I can go, cool, I hired someone to do the cover, it's done, and boom, I'm out, and I can finish it, and it's out as quickly as I want it out there, which I love. You did mention in my intro the ghostwriting. That's a little different in that those have all been kind of done by different small presses, and those are a little different because those are written for people essentially who they've been clients who want to write a book and don't know how to write. So you know, that they hire someone like me to write those for them, and to express themselves as an expert in the field. So.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. And you actually went to the point, and I think, Phyllis, you're in this situation too, and if others are, let me know, but you know, Jonathan, you have Brick Pickle Pulp, like you set up your own publishing company. And Phyllis, it sounds like you did that as well when you were talking about the imprints.
Yes, I am a co-partner on an LLC called Back Porch Productions. And then under that, I have 2 imprints, and my partner may be establishing her own imprint. And so I publish under One Sky Press for my fiction and Bell Sound Books for my nonfiction and poetry.
Okay. And can some of the rest of you tell me a little bit exactly kind of more the logistical piece of self-publishing, like where you go to do that? You know, I know Amazon has a platform, there's other platforms out there. Like, where do you actually go to, you know, upload your Word document file or whatever, and then boom, you get a book in the mail? Like, what's that piece of it?
Yeah, I can take that one. I use what's called an aggregator, which is a service that once you have your manuscript finished, you send it to them. They can design a cover for you if you choose. You can design your own cover. They will set it up for print on demand. They will set up the ebook versions, all the different ones that you need, you know, Kindle and Nook and Kobo and the other ones, Apple. And they do all these things for a fee. They don't do any marketing for you. They just get it ready. But then they take care of distribution through Ingram Spark. So you can, bookstores can order your book and you know, either they can stock it if they want. Like I have my book stocked in a few bookstores locally, and there may be some other places, but unless you're a big name, you're not going to get shelf space on most bookstores. You know, certainly not in the Barnes and Noble, because you know it's it's the publishing business, not the ego gratification. So they do that for a fee, and then you can hire your own editor if you want. You should hire your own editor, you know, book cover designer, all that sort of stuff, and then the marketing is totally up to you. So it's worked well, but I actually did get a business name. I'm call it CSN Press, and I think my 3rd book I may skip the aggregator and go directly work with Ingram Spark for the print on demand, or maybe somebody like Draft to Digital, and then deal with Amazon as necessary for ebooks and for online sales and things like that. It's a little more daunting, but what I know now is I think I can get most of that stuff done, either pay someone to do it or do it myself and keep more of the profits, you know, which are you know, because BookLocker takes my aggregator takes a slice of things just for as the books come through and things like that. So yeah.
Right. Anybody else want to weigh in about how your books actually came to be?
Sure. So way back in the dark ages, when I was just in broadcasting, I would do sort of side projects, so little short films and things like that, to just keep my skills sharp, because I wanted to move up, because at that time I thought broadcasting was going to be the way to go. Definitely couldn't have foreseen the rise of streaming and all the multiple channels that we have now. And there's actually a company called Lulu, I believe, and I'm sure they do good work, but for me, the way that I was using them, they're in essence kind of like a fancy Kinko's. You send them your content, and they would, a couple weeks later, they'd send you back, you know, the finished product. And it was no frills, no thrills. Like if you had something out of whack or it wasn't formatted properly, well, that's what you got back. And that was just to pass out like scripts and shooting screenplays and that kind of thing. And so when you fast forward to when I was trying to get my first serious books out there, there's a company called CreateSpace. It was just all the digital age. So just Googling around, CreateSpace seemed to have a lot of reviews. A few other friends that had done, or that are authors and had done some writing, they're like, oh yeah, CreateSpace is great. And the thing I really liked about them is they provided templates. So you could just download, and it was pre-formatted. And you literally just a Word template, and then you just drop everything in, and it formatted things nicely. It had the margins, you could have your page numbers, it had like your book plates and all that. Everything was laid out, and I was like, oh, this is great. No frills, I can just focus on the writing, because when I write, it's kind of all over the place. I'll sketch something here, I'll type something here, I'll even like dictate crazy ideas to myself on my phone while I'm driving, and then I just get back and throw it all together. So to have something where it's like, okay, great, I can now take kind of all these raw materials and throw it into this pot. I guess maybe I'm hungry. Sorry for all the food analogies. And it actually comes out nicely. And then once I have that formatted, then I can send it to have to be proofread and have it edited. And CreateSpace was acquired by Amazon a little while ago, but the process stayed the same. And I've actually had a lot of, I know Amazon has mixed reviews, we'll say, as far as the way people feel about it. For me personally, it's worked really well. It's gotten my content and my sort of library, the 7 books I have, it's gotten out to audiences I don't think I ever would have been able to reach, because they do have that sort of international distribution model where people can order hard copies, or as Chris mentioned, like some of the ebooks. I do like to do my own covers. Just again, it was sort of that, I don't know if it's a DIY punk rock thing, but like when I started talking to people about like, oh, well, yeah, this is the next step after your query letter, after you have your manuscript, after you find an editor, you can also go out and find designers and work with them. And I was always a little wary, again, just speaking for myself, about trying to just like distill down like a couple hundred pages of story into like, okay, here's the image, and then trust someone else to do it. So I was just like, I'm gonna do it. So I kind of fumble around in Photoshop and Illustrator, and my covers aren't great. And I was actually joking with the Deep Valley Book Festival site, seeing all my covers together. I was like, oh my God, like you can definitely tell that this was done by someone who has a, 5 out of 10 level of understanding of design.
I have
really
a 1 out of 10 level of understanding book covers.
5 is great.
But I just like that control element, and Amazon, and not to push them per se, but just that platform with the templates and the ease of getting it out there. It's very streamlined. Like they're really good at what they do. I understand why they're such a behemoth, because they make it very, very, very easy.
Yeah, for sure. And you've all brought up some good points too, just in terms of money, money that you have to outlay. I mean, I think people need to realize that I think it would be almost virtually impossible to publish a book without paying any money, unless you were an amazing editor or, designer, that kind of thing, that you could do it all yourself. But no matter what you do, like self-publishing, okay, you're going to pay money to a service or to an editor, designer, what have you. You're maybe going to pay somebody to help you do your marketing. But, for myself, and I went with a more traditional publisher, and I was able to get, an editor to take my memoir and publish it that way. But then like the money is kind of on the back end, where they give me an advance, and then I have to sell books in order to make money. Like they're getting a cut, right? And if you go to an agent, if you manage to get an agent, the agent's going to get a cut. So it's like there's always going to be money somewhere, that even if you think, oh, I don't have to pay an agent, but they're still like taking the money, after the fact. So I think that that's something important for people to think about as well. And speaking of those services, can you all talk about, anybody that you do hire? Do you hire editors? Do you hire designers? Do you hire marketing people to help with marketing? Like what kind of services are you buying or purchasing out there to get your books out?
Sure. I'll jump in. I think definitely, I always have an editor, and just like probably a lot of us, I'm fine as an editor. I edit books for other people, but that doesn't mean I'm going to say I can edit my own book, because unlike other writers, every word I write is beautiful and should not be cut. So, we know that we all love our own work. But, I'll use an editor. I have used designers on some books. Some books I've designed my own covers. It depends on the book and what I'm kind of trying to accomplish with it. And marketing, for better or worse, I've done most of my own. I haven't hired anybody to help with that. It's been kind of self-taught, trying to just watch a lot of webinars, read a lot of blogs, and try to figure out what works and what doesn't work, see what other authors are doing, and then experiment. And some things work and some things don't, at least for me.
The path I've taken is a little bit different. My first book was published by a regular traditional press. And I made enough off of that I bought the rights back from them, so it's mine. So everything since then, I've found a company in Atlanta, in Georgia, and this company is called Jera Publishing, and I use them exclusively. They have a staff, And once they set the book up, you can pick all kinds of different, whatever style you want it to be. There are several styles. And so I go through them, and they lay it out. They do the layout for me. They'll do the cover. They'll do everything. The cover, I prefer to have my designed picture on the front, whether it's something pulled out of an archive someplace, or whether it's something done by, I have friends. I have a lady that's an artist that did one of my book covers. But so I had to have that done there, and it's economical. They don't charge a whole lot of money, and once it's done, it's done, and that's all I pay for. And then I go to Ingram Spark to have it printed, and they have their set fee, and I have it listed on Amazon, and I have a lot of social media places where I go with what I have. And the last Zoom that I was on, affiliated with the same festival, I made some suggestions, and if anybody wants ideas, I'm only happy to share what I have, but it's probably not appropriate for this. But if they go on my website and ask me, I'll give them anything they need. It's nothing I want to keep secret, because it's a wonderful pastime. It's great, and it's enjoyable. So everybody.
Sure. Yeah, and thank you. And I should mention that people can find all of you on the author directory on the Deep Valley website, and from there, they are taken to your websites, or they can find your contact information there. So that's very helpful. I think you're all very easy to get in touch with. Phyllis or T. Aaron or Chris, about the or Chris, you already mentioned, right, about the logistical aspect of it. Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
Well, a lot of what I've heard is similar to things that I do. I would just emphasize that you want your book to look indistinguishable from the books from a traditional publisher. And so for me, that starts even with the software that I use to write with. I invest in that, and then all the way up the chain through the editors, the designers, and everything, because I want it to look professional. And when I look at the things that I did early on, when the tools were not as good and I was not as knowledgeable, it doesn't hold a candle to what I'm doing now. And once in a while, I'll do a special edition. My latest book actually came. It's For the Sake of One We Love and Are Losing. It came to me in a dream right before the pandemic hit the United States. And it's just a bizarre story, which I won't get into, but in the dream, the text came in a turquoise book. And so I wanted a very special feel to this book, and I didn't think I could get it working through my traditional channels. And so I put out a special edition that I did with some local help here. And then eventually, because of the popularity of this, I realized that I could do a spin-off condolence card, which has also been popular. And again, this would be harder to do if you were going the traditional publishing route,
Mm-hmm.
So it just depends on the project that I'm doing. I try to be flexible, but that requires me to kind of keep educating myself, as others have said, about what strategies and technologies are out there, and don't feel limited. If I have a vision, go for it.
Yeah, there is a lot of flexibility in for all of you, in your approach, and there's a lot of immediacy. A lot of you had talked about going a more traditional route. You're waiting a long time, and even for myself, I'm finding myself less and less willing to do that. I think I'm getting more and more impatient as I get older, and there's definitely a lot of benefits to just think, oh, I can put this out there. And I think it was, T. Aaron, where you said about back in the day, right? And that particular company, nothing more than maybe a glorified Kinko's. And that's what you were talking about too, Phil, that there was a time when you could easily tell which books had been self-published. And as a result, it really got kind of a poor reputation, because the quality just wasn't there. But easily, with the technology that we have now, that a lot of us have access to, whether it's design technology or more kind of page layout technology, and certainly just overall the industry's technology, like Phyllis said, self-published books are virtually indistinguishable, and the quality has just gone up so much. And I think that's pushing a lot more people to say this is a really viable option, because it's gaining so much more traction and so much more credibility, that I tell people all the time. I teach writing classes, and I tell them, why not? Why not go that route? Because there's a lot of benefits to it. Can we talk a little bit more about rejection? Because it sounds like some of you maybe did try to say, oh, maybe I should send this to an editor, I should send this to an agent. Number one, how did that make you feel? And number two, how did you how did you persevere? Obviously, you all still have books, so, what's kind of going through your mind, and what really helped you to not give up, even though other people are kind of weighing in and judging your work? T. Aaron, do you want to start? Because I think you were the one who started us down this path anyway.
Yeah, I think it still stings a bit, because I do still, on occasion, because I try to constantly write, because I figure I had a friend a long time ago that it's somewhat cynical quote that, like, if you can't be great, be prolific. So I do try to continuously write, as I completely conflate those words on a writing panel.
No judgment.
It stung a lot more when I was starting out, because I put a lot more weight into, like, this one or this handful of publishing houses or literary agents. They are representative of, like, the masses. It's like, so the opinion of this one person, depending on their one mood at that one particular time when they read, my query letter or my first 3 chapters or whatever, they were the representative for, the entire planet. I was like, well, if they don't like it, this is going to be horrible. And then it kind of turned almost like a teenager. It became sort of like a badge of honor. It's like, oh, okay, well, fine, screw you then. If you like, I'm still going to put it out. And then once I did kind of take that sort of like angsty teenager outlook, and then saw like a positive reception where I'd go to like book fairs or comic conventions and have a table, and people were like, yo, hey, I this looks interesting. I'll take a copy. Or then I was like, oh, well, maybe that one literary agent, maybe that one rep from the publishing house, maybe they're not representative of everyone. Maybe it was just their opinion. And then it became sort of an Ouroboros, sort of, where I would talk to people who were traditionally published. It's like, oh, well, what you need to do, just get yourself an agent. It streamlines the whole process. It's like, oh, okay, that sounds cool. So now I would start sending out letters to agents, and a lot of them, and it makes me laugh now. It was very frustrating back then, but then they would say, well, where have you published? And so I had to stop. So for clarification, if I want to get published, I need an agent. But if I want an agent, I need to be published. I feel like there's something missing in this circle here. But yes, the rejections now, they still sting, but it's more of a, I don't know, it's like an ignition spark. I kind of use it as fuel and a motivator by saying, like, okay, well, I'm just going to sort of prove them wrong, because like the best revenge is good living. And not, maybe revenge is too hard of a word, but just sort of like, I know I'm starting to ramble, but Toni Morrison has that fantastic quote that if there's a book you want to read but you can't find it, I'm paraphrasing, then you must write it. And so I just feel like, well, they're not going to get in the way of me, living up to the late Toni Morrison's quote, so I'm still going to put it out there. So the rejections, that's for the boilerplate. I like those. When they get personal, that hurts a little bit. Like my last book, since everyone's telling you up, was a memoir about me, which was probably the scariest thing, because with all the fiction stuff, if you don't like it, I can distance. Like, oh, you don't like the characters, you don't like the plot. If you don't like Black Nerd Blue Box, then you don't like me. And I'm not the kind of person that needs everyone to like me, but it does hurt when someone just comes up to you and says, hey, I don't like you, even if they're not saying it that way. So I like criticism as opposed to rejection. And if I can't get either of those, then the boilerplate, like, thank you for your submission at this time. Unfortunately, we're blah, blah, blah. Those are fine. And my goal one day is to just have like a room, maybe this workshop, where I can just wallpaper it, like laminate all the rejection letters as I'm like writing my notes to receive like some fantastic literary award.
I think that's great. I think that's a great plan. And I keep them. I keep all my rejections. So even, even when they're coming over email, like I put them in a little folder, because yes, there's always those dreams of someday they're going to be sorry.
Right.
How about others of you?
I early on, like the first 5-6 years that I was writing, I belonged to an online critique group, and where you can pick and choose who you critique, and they can choose to critique your work, and it's a chapter by chapter submission. And I ran into one guy who was actually quite good writer, and we informally started this thing called the Thick Skin Club. And he actually, I bought one of his books and he signed it to me as a member of the Thick Skin Club, quote, "You suck," exclamation point, unquote, get over it. And I don't mind rejection at all, because I always look at it as, well, it's not good enough. But then if you think it's only one person reading your work who's deciding on a split second, maybe reading the first page, or maybe reading your query letter, or maybe you send them a couple chapters and they decide it's not for them, don't take it personally. And it's just one of those things that it doesn't bother me, but that's just my personal nature. I'd rather have somebody tell me that this needs a lot of work, get better, rather than, oh, it's wonderful, and then you think you get an inflated ego and you put it out there and nobody buys it, nobody reads it, and those who do say, this is the worst thing I ever read. So
I would imagine that just about everybody on this panel has written something, a sentence even, or a paragraph, and man, it's beautiful. You just, boy, that layout, I just love this. And you have to cut it. But the term they use, and I'm sure you've all heard this, is murdering your baby. If you have to take away something that you just absolutely love, it hurts. But in order to advance yourself, I think it has to be done. And it sounds callous, but I took quite a few writing classes at the Loft Literary Center in Minneapolis. And boy, you develop a thick skin. If you're sitting in a classroom with 4, or let's say anywhere between 10 and 15 to 20 students, and you've been given a writing assignment, and you bring it in, and it's all, everyone comments on it, you do develop a pretty thick skin, and you have to have it. And it doesn't mean that your writing is poor. It means, geez, he's right. I've got to correct that. And it's a good thing. It's a good thing. So don't ever take it as an insult, because it might be terrible to that person. Another person might just love it.
And that's a good point. I think it's super important to have feedback. I mean, you need feedback, right? Because like Jonathan said, sure, we can look at our own work and think it's pretty great, but we definitely need people who are maybe not necessarily our moms to read our work and try to be impartial judges. And, actually now that's a good note that we can wrap up on, Dale, because you really had a piece of advice there for writers. And really, we've had advice for writers throughout this whole thing. But with the couple of minutes that we have left, I want to go around and just ask each of you, for someone who maybe has written a book, they have a manuscript, and now they really want to publish it, what would be your piece of advice for them? So can we start with Jonathan? What would you say?
Sure. Now you go in reverse alphabetical
Put you on the spot.
So, I think probably just reiterate some of the things we talked about, is that you have to realize this is, you have to do it because you love to do it, and not that you're going to get rich doing it. I mean, yes, it'd be great if you could be J.K. Rowling or, Stephen King or whoever, but we all know the vast majority of authors aren't going to get rich, and you're going to, we all joked about it, but the truth is, yeah, you're trying to break even. You got to do it because you want to put something out there that you want to be read, that, you write because I think most of us write because we have to write. And we know what that, writers know what that means. It's because you have something you want to put out there and you hope people enjoy it. And yes, it'd be great if we break even, make a little money. That's all good. And realize it is an investment, like we said. So get that help that, like we talked about, those professionals to help you with the things you can't do yourself.
Great, thank you. Dale, is there anything else that you would add to your piece of advice?
Well, I would just like to, people often need help, and they're a lot of times they're afraid to ask for it. But I really do believe that as a writer and as someone that's published some books and someone that is, I think, kind of an open mind, it's best to try to assist anyone that helps you, because I don't think there's a person alive that would want to write something and find out later that it's filled with grammatical errors or it's just a mess. And that was my fear. And that's why I didn't self-publish any books until I was sure that they were good enough. And to me, that was to have a traditional publisher do it. But it's well worth everybody's time to look into what's available to learn, because
Sure.
it's not an easy task. It's not just like falling off a log.
No, I wish it was.
Yes.
Chris, how about you?
My piece of advice is to understand that being an author these days is basically a two-hat job. You're the creative person and you're also the business person. And the business part of things can take a huge amount of time, depending on how much money you want to earn off of your books, how many books you want to sell. So go in, learn as much as you can about maybe not being the business expert, but knowing that you're going to have to handle the marketing and handle the publicity and handle the social media and all these things, and be ready to do that, be ready and willing to do that, or just accept the fact that maybe I'll write a fantastic book and not a lot of people are going to hear about it because I'm just not a good marketer, or I don't want to put in the time to do that, or I don't have the time to do that.
Thank you. Phyllis.
Oh, so many popcorns going off here. Well, I would say, first of all, be clear with your intentions. Why is it that you're wanting to write what you're wanting to write? And secondly, be clear about your audience. Who are you writing for? I don't know how many times I have conversations with aspiring writers and they tell me all about their book, and then I ask them, well, who's your audience? And they say, everybody will love this book. It's not going to work because you can't market to everybody, just for one thing there. So, and the other thing I would say to piggyback off of what Chris was just saying about marketing and writing, I have to split my day between the business end, which includes the marketing in the morning when I'm least able to write in my experience, and then my creative writing in the afternoon. And I try to really honor that. So even if you can only afford a half hour of writing every day, guard that half an hour, make it sacred time. That is, because you got to show up or the muse won't, is the way I think about it. And I really encourage to have that set apart time where you're not going to have any distractions, nobody bothering you, and really, really hold to that.
Mm-hmm. Excellent point. And T. Aaron, you get the last word.
Oh boy, no pressure.
Yes.
I'd say, like, there's a popular adage about how you can be your own harshest critic or your own worst critic. I would counter and say, especially if you're just starting out, you have a manuscript, you want to do it, you should also be the president of your fan club. You should be your biggest source of encouragement, because there are definitely going to be times at all stages, whether you've self-published and worked and not to be presumptuous, but if you've worked with publishers, but just from the writing stage to the marketing stage, there's going to be something or multiple times where you're going to feel discouraged. It's going to feel like nothing's working, or it's not right, or just the frustration of staring at that blank page on the screen or in the typewriter or whatever, and saying like, oh, I had an idea, but maybe I'm not cut out for this because I only have the first couple hundred words, and now it's kind of petered out. If you start doubting yourself, then that, I think, is one of the biggest handicaps. That's one of the biggest obstacles. But just, I mean, that feeling of finishing it, not necessarily accomplishment or achievement, but just finishing it and holding something you created in your hands and being able to say like, yep, like, look, I did this. And then going past that point by putting something out there and having people respond to it, whether positive or negative, the fact that you have something to be responded to is a huge step. So as long as you kind of like can be your own source of encouragement and keep going, reminding yourself that like, you know, you're doing this because you love it, because there's this compulsion that you have to get these stories out there, whether fiction or not, you have to contribute and create. That helps in the long run. It doesn't mean that you'll avoid those moments of frustration, but it does make them a little bit easier to kind of get to the other side.
Thank you. I love that. And I thank all 5 of you for joining us today and giving such great information and great advice to writers who are interested in publishing at some point. So we'll wrap it up today. I just want to let our audience know that they can go to deepvalleybookfestival.com. They can look all of you up on the author pages and see what you've written, and from there find your social media accounts or emails or that type of thing, websites, to get in touch with you if they have any questions. So thank you for making yourselves available to that. And I thank everybody who's been listening, and we have our next panel coming up at 3 o'clock. So I hope that you continue to enjoy what we have offered here at the Deep Valley Book Festival. Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Thanks.